Good afternoon. This is the Devar Torah on Parashat Beshalach. This is the parsha where we finally see the end of the Egyptians who have been involved in the first three parshas. Hashem hardens the heart of Pharaoh and his servants and his army, and they go after the Jews. They catch up with them 3 days later, and in the climatic cycle, Hashem tells them to advance into the water as a sign of faith. They do. The sea splits into 12 sections with all kinds of miraculous occurrences. The cloud of fire and the cloud of darkness go behind the camp of Bnei Israel and stop the Egyptians. In fact, when they try shooting weapons at them, the clouds make them rebound on the Egyptian army itself. The next day, they follow after all the Jews have safely crossed. The Egyptians go into the sea, which is still dry land. God commands Moshe, and he raises his staff. An order was come flowing back, and the entire Egyptian army is drowned. Their bodies washed ashore so that the Bnei Israel realize they don't have to be afraid. They're gone. And then they start testing Moshe and Hashem. They complain there's no water. They then complain, not only is there no water, which Hashem shows Moshe how to provide for it. And then he complained about lack of food. Hashem gives them the man. He also teaches them the laws of Shabbos, that there will be only man, the special heavenly food, for 6 days. 7th day, they're supposed to stay in their tents, which is one of the first commandments they get. After that, they move again, and the people agree on Rafidim. Again, there's no water. Moshe says, "What am I going to do with the God? What am I going to do with people?" He tells them to break the rock. Water comes flowing out. It's actually in the of Miriam and Neviah. And Amalek attacks them at Rephidim. And the parsha ends with the partial triumph against Amalek. Battles led by Yeshua. What I'd like to speak about in this parsha is what exactly is going on with it. Now, there's a number of things. Now, in terms of Amalek, you were attacked by the Amalekites. And first of all, why were they attacked by the Amalekites? And before we even get to why, who are the Amalekites that attacked them? Now, there's the spiritual element of Amalek, which I'm only going to allude to briefly. I'm going to be giving it further Devar Torah on this for Parshas Zachor, Shabbat Zachor, which is the Shabbat before Purim, which fits that Maftir features additional Torah reading focuses on that. But just to give a little background, I'll be giving into more spiritual, deeper background then. But just giving a little, when is the first mention of when is the first mention of them? And to see it, the first mention of them goes back very far. In Parshas Lech Lecha, surprisingly enough, in chapter 14, Pasuk um, 7, it says, Yishvu Levavo El Ayin Mishpat Shehu Kaddish Yehu Kol Haseda Amaleki Gam et Mori V'Yashav B'Batzom Tamar. And translated is when the 4 kings that Abraham eventually defies the battle against the 5 kings. It says that he turned back and came to Ayin Mishpat, Nakadash, and he conquered the entire field of the Amalekites. Now, Amalek, the physical Amalek, doesn't appear for a few generations later. So what is it talking about? There's a spiritual Amalekite factor, according to the majority of the opinions. And now what does Amalekite factor mean is that what does Amalek represent? He's an aspect of the impure force of the Yetzer Hara, which, as I said, I'll speak about more on Shabbat Zachor. But he does not believe anything happens with any guidance. Everything is random. In other words, there's no recognition of God, no recognition of any higher power. And what does he do? He attacks. Now, he knew he wasn't going to be able to beat the Bnei Israel. Yet, as Ramban explains, he figured up to now all the nations feared the Jews after the Yom Suf and the drowning of Egyptians. So he figured it's like somebody, this analogy used by one of the Rishonim, early commentaries, that it's like this: if a person jumps into a boiling hot bath, he'll get badly burned, but it will also reduce the temperature of the water. So he was willing to forego that. And from that, the nations took the wrong lesson and said, hey, if the Jews are not invulnerable, so, Amalek didn't take the right method, we'll find the right method. And that's been a history. Jewish people had to face both in Eretz Israel and when they're long exiles, is that, we find the right method, we can annihilate the Jews, wipe them out. So that is the spiritual Amalek. Now, the physical Amalek, who was he? He was the son of a he was the son of a princess, and and in the was a non-Jewish princess. She wanted to join the heritage and family of Abraham. She first has to be converted by the Abraham. Said she wasn't genuine, same with Yitzchak. And when she couldn't marry anybody in Abraham's family, she figured she'd do the next best thing, marry be a concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son, and from there descended Amalek. Now, according to some, he may be in one of the Erev Rav. Again, I'll explain that more in Shabbat Zachor. In any event, he came out to do battle. Now, a few questions here. How was he able to attack the Jewish people in the first place? And why did this happen immediately after we complained about lack of water with feeding? And what's the connection between these two? If you look a little deeper, what did we do? We challenged God in 2 ways. we weren't learning his Torah, and we were complaining we didn't trust in him, that he'd provide for us after all the miracles we saw. So what happened? They didn't learn the Torah they were supposed to, which is primary protection of Jewish people. And they were protesting and complaining, and therefore, really, in a way, slandering Moshe, God, Moshe, and some spoke Lashon Hara. Now, Lashon Hara is a disease, it produces a series of diseases called saras. It's a spiritual illness, and which renders them impure. So what happened? How were the Amalekites allowed to attack? What happened to the super defense shield that they had at the time of crossing the Yam Suf, where nothing could hurt them? The weapons went back. That was true of most of the camp. But what happened is a minority of the camp, had been speaking Lashon Hara. They got ejected, and those are the ones they attacked. Now, in the battle, Yeshua is called to lead the troops, and he's told to pick 1,000 men. Now, the question is why Yeshua as opposed to anybody else? And it explains that Yeshua's constant task was to learn Torah from morning to night. And he was versed purely in Torah. And the Torah is what gave the people strength. And all the soldiers he recruited, all the people were the same. Now, why the drought, and then why that Rafidim, then why the attack? It's explained that Torah can be compared to both water and fire. We were slandering the Torah. We were not keeping and learning it the way we should have. So first Hashem gave them a warning. They got the water cut off, and even though they had a miracle, still didn't get it. And then the Amalekites' attack was Torah can also be fire, and this fire represented war. Now, this being the case, what happened then? Eventually, they were defeated, but not wiped out. And then that Moshe, it says, Yom Hashem al Moshe, Ketsuv Zot, and Zikron B'Sefer, and Saim Aznai B'Yeshua, Keimachet Amachat, and to Zachor, Amalek, B'Tachet Shemayim, and Ven Mizbeach, Likra, Mise V'Yomer, Al Kise, Yad Al Kisa, Milchama, and Ladnoi Amalek, Lador, Lador. Now, if you look at it, it's missing letters. The word Kisei, missing an aleph. The letters are missing. And so what happened? They say only because it's a war, and only will only when his name, when Amalek is wiped out from under the sky, it says twice Maka Maka raised, and this is from under the heavens. Now there's a question. Obviously, Amalekites were on earth, so why the double language, and why did it have to say they wiped them out? So, as is explained by the Oracle with his question, it's telling us two things. It's telling us the different incidents when we were going to have to do it. Now, when were they? One was at the time of Shavuot, when almost the entire Amalekites were erased. They were almost totally erased. It's told in Sefer Shmuel. If, in fact, they would have been eliminated if Shaul hadn't shown false rachamim and allowed him, Agag, the king there, the only survivor, to father a child with a concubine at night, which eventually led to Haman and the incidents of the Purim story. And so why is it saying it twice? The first mark is talking about the destruction of most of them at the time of Shaul. Also, as the Orachaim explains, 75,000 people were killed in total in the story of Purim. Megillas Esther, and the real Amalekites, both the ones who were killed in the capital and around the 127 provinces. And therefore, so what's the third time under the heavens? That's to tell us in his Zman Mashiach, he'll be totally eliminated. The work will finally be eliminated. And one final thing from the Rav Shimshon Maasr tells us, interestingly enough, and I want to quote it. Where it says, He, Bachar Hashem B'Tzion, Yiva Nushabo. For Hashem has chosen Zion, he desires for his habitation. And then it goes from resting place forever, for I shall dwell, for I dwell and shall desire it. Now, Rav Shimshon Maasr explains, it says, Ki Bacha B'Shem Tehillim, Hashem B'Tzion, Os Shavlo. Shegia Zman Gula, what's going to happen? The Hashem is going to return to Tzion. In other words, the follows that he will be to him the Aleph Vav Hey. And what is the Aleph Vav Hey telling us? That the Vav Hey Meshem Shem and the Aleph will be in the Kisei that's improperly, not fully written, and that will be the ultimate redemption. Now, as we are looking at events, there is an Amalekite fact. It doesn't mean necessarily a physical Amalekite of doubt of Yetzer Hara in the world, great presence now, and we should remember that we have to always be on guard against it. It's also in a spiritual battle to not be down even in challenging times. And may we see our ultimate redemption soon. And may our enemies continue to fall as Amalek did. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.